I was thinking about unspoken agreements, and God, what is that book Eli had referenced before?
Not the four agreements, is
The
it?
Four Agreements.
Oh,
Yeah,
it is the
yeah,
four agreements. Look at me, I'm psychic.
yeah. I think I don't think it's how it's framed or the wording is different, but unspoken agreements, is that part of
Just
the?
being transparent is one of the hallmarks is one of the four agreements. Being transparent, like saying what you mean and meaning what you say, basically.
Yeah. So the unspoken agreement would be the antonym of that rule.
Yes. Yeah. These are the assumptions that lead the other person to look like the ass.
And I have a theory that unspoken agreements is a very common corruption in relationship development or connection or long-term maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And I often believe people don't really see that they exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a subconscious thing that fuels resentment and disconnection and intolerance in a relationship.
So give me an example.
I can give you one from my past relationship.
Yeah. I'll give you one between me and
So,
my ex-husband too.
and I will say on the other side of an unspoken agreement, you feel completely insane. So I'll give you this scenario. I had a plan to go to DC to visit a friend, and I was leaving on a Friday. So my ex came to me about this. I did not bring this up, and said, "Hey, I want you to not feel any pressure to reach out and be present with your friend over the weekend. No, it's important." Sounds great. So while I'm there, there's some sporadic texting throughout the day. I'm going to museums, walking around. My phone is not top priority, especially since I had been communicated to be present with my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And FaceTimed every day in the evening for 15, 20 minutes.
Is this with an ex-girlfriend?
Yeah, my most recent. I get picked up from the airport. Everything seems okay. And then later on in the evening, she comes to me and talks about how upset she is that I wasn't very communicative during my trip.
So she's very anxious.
And it's a complete contrast from the information that was shared with me. So it's even different than me coming that Thursday evening and saying, "Hey, I'll be not very present with my phone this weekend. I'll check in ever so often." The paradoxical part of this is that she came to me saying, "Hey, this is the expectation, no pressure."
Mm-hmm.
And then comes back later and is sharing her feelings, right? Because we always have to share those with our partner.
Oh my God. That's exhausting.
And they always have to show up when we share them as well. So I think that was an example of unspoken agreement.
So that basically she was assuming that you had already known and were a mind reader, that she expected you to be in like daily communication with her or like frequent communication.
So I was in daily communication and even FaceTimes in the evenings. I think what happened is cognitively she could say, "Hey, this is the right thing to do, and I'm
Which
up for it."
is what?
To say, "Hey, no pressure this weekend, just check in ever so often, have fun." Cognitively, that is something that I want to say and want to provide to my boyfriend. Emotionally, she couldn't maintain that.
Because she just kept getting anxious about you not communicating?
I mean, who knows? Yes.
I mean, that's kind of like the missing information. Based upon like how she acted, one could assume that she became anxious while you were at the museum were you with somebody else or you were by yourself?
With my friend.
Oh, with your friend. Okay.
Yeah. So it's as though the agreement is that in spite of what you've said, I'm going to actually be more engaged. Because that will show that I really care about you and you're very important.
I mean, that's just classic anxious attachment behavior.
Yeah.
And immaturity.
Mm-hmm.
But then how did you feel when she confronted you?
Baffled.
Like, what the fuck did I do wrong?
It feels so fucking unfair. It's very challenging. Like I'm pretty good at not being emotionally reactionary. Mm-hmm. And I will say something like that is very tough to take a breath and respond from. I mean, I'm not talking about a rageful yelling, but to take a breath and not respond in a defensive posturing. But then arguably it's like, well, you kind of should.
So how did you respond?
I think I just felt that frustration and then pretty much described it how I did to you. It's like, well, that Thursday you told me to not worry about being constantly interactive, and I was with my friends spending time there, and I did FaceTime you numerous times while I was there. So if you have a feeling about that, you have to process that. And we get in a conversation where I would often be like, I don't need to know every part of your emotional experience. And she thought that was completely crazy.
That's, I mean, this sounds like high school.
Yeah.
That must have how it felt. I mean, that's the energy I'm getting. Like, that must have felt like immaturity in high school to you, because I just can't imagine if my husband or partner is on a trip, me needing to be up his ass every hour. Well, just
imagine, but imagine this: you going out of your way on a Thursday. Hey, have fun with your friend. I'll be at the house. Don't worry about all this interaction. Then you notice that you have anxiety about him doing whatever without much basis for that anxiety. And then you have the audacity the day he comes back to share all of this emotional projection onto him.
Yeah. I mean, there's a severe lack of self-reflection going on her side of the street for sure. Yeah. So she basically blamed you for the anxiety she had and made it your fault that she had anxiety. And therefore, because she's sharing with you, she has this emotion. She's like handing it off to you and expecting you to do something with it to make her feel better.
Yeah. And
this is like the classic
assigning blame to me.
Assigning blame. Yeah. I mean, that's the classic presentation for couples counseling, is people not being able to take responsibility for their own emotions and then passing it off to the partner.
Yeah. She didn't want to do couples counseling. Wouldn't have been able to keep up.
No, I just can't even imagine that, because I mean, I don't know. I don't want to know. Like, I don't need to be like constantly involved in what's going on with my spouse.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you can't trust the person, then why the fuck are you with the person?
Or if you can't trust anyone you're attached to.
Yeah.
Got to be exhausting. That's it's a bad time because it's exhausting for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when I was thinking about this topic, unspoken agreements, I was thinking about the one that I think that's developed over time between me and my ex-husband. And it's more his presumption or assumption that I won't comment on the ongoings of his house. And then he won't comment on the ongoings of my house, because our two boys go back and forth, or at least they used to. But I've decided to break that rule. And
you're just like,
I'm just waiting for the fireworks. But but I'm doing it. So I mean, this is sad. Like, okay, so my son told me that his father revealed that the family dog is very, very sick, and they had to take the dog to the vet. And now it has needed some surgery and very expensive spinal surgery. The dog wasn't walking. Thankfully, she's not incontinent, but the surgery was successful, and it looked like my ex-husband was keeping my sons abreast of all of the developments with the family dog. And so my boys, of course, were sharing that with me, and we were talking a lot about their grief and their sadness about, the possibility of losing their dog or their dog being injured, whatnot. And so I decided to compliment my ex-husband on how he handled that with my boys. And just, I said, thank you. You want me to read you the text?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. He hasn't responded. But it says, thank you for being transparent and forthcoming with information about Ava's health and surgery. Ava's the dog. The boys have been able to process and talk about their concerns. I hope she is on the mend and feels better soon. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I imagine it's going to be something very defensive coming out of that. But yeah, so I wish I had more to report, but I don't.
So electing to not be a participant of what's going on at that house is the hopes that there's not this defensive posturing that you're anticipating now.
I think he'll get defensive either way. Yeah. I think, the
One of those
unspoken agreement
lose-lose.
is you just don't say anything about what's going on at my house. Because anything I ever said just resorts in him just like yelling and screaming and getting really defensive and
So it's a shame
dysregulated.
evoking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everything is very shame. Anything can be shame evoking for him. You just never know what it's going to be.
Dang.
But unfortunately, I think that unspoken agreement kind of trickled down to my boys in the sense that, like, historically, not so much in the past 2 years, but longer than 2 years ago, they wouldn't tell me about the things going on at their house, their dad's house. And it's only within the past 2 years that I've learned more. And it's just, I wish I had known. I think I would have handled things differently or been more confrontational with him. But, because I think he and the wife are in some measure of addiction with alcohol. And
so the kids were signing that unspoken agreement.
Yeah, they were
well.
too. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what exactly was the straw that broke the camel's back and made my boys be more transparent and forthcoming. But I'm thankful that they are with me.
Might just be age and development.
Yeah, it could be. Very well could be.
Beginning to be more autonomous.
Yeah, definitely have divided. They are definitely developing their own identities. So, yeah.
I was trying to pull up some more examples. These are kind of basic, but the unspoken agreement, we don't show anger or frustration with each other. And the result is unexpressed emotions pile up, leading to passive-aggressive behaviors or explosive fights later.
Yeah.
We won't talk about finances unless it becomes an emergency. Result, financial strain builds silently, creating anxiety or resentment.
I think that leads, that wasn't finances like one of the number one, or is the number one reason for divorce?
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that happening in my current relationship. I think we're slowly getting better about being more forthcoming. But yeah, talking about money is very shame evoking too.
So from these examples, it sounds like maintaining an unspoken agreement is an attempt to regulate the partner and ourselves. So I'm fearful of speaking my truth, but I'm also fearful as to how you will react when I do. So a lot remains unsaid, and then emotions pile up. And often if we keep emotions suppressed, they stop making sense based on the facts of what's actually happening too, because it impacts our own phenomenology and our emotional schema of past and current. People that aren't even involved relationally to the topic are going to have emotional influence in terms of how we perceive what we're avoiding.
Yeah, because then starts the conflict cycle, right? Because when one partner violates that unspoken agreement, like I'm thinking about like things I've seen in practice. Granted, I don't see couples, but like one unspoken agreement that typically comes when clients are trying to get to the core issue of or resolve attachment trauma is that they're now in marriages or partnerships where the rule is you, meaning my client, don't comment on how my actions, the spouse, affect you. Like, you just need to keep your mouth shut. Like, I'm going to walk around this house and slam doors and, kick over a chair if I'm frustrated or scream.
Yeah,
But
it's none of your business.
But you're not allowed to say, hey, that really causes me to have a stress response when, I'm hearing doors slamming. So, or you're not allowed to, say when I, like if the spouse uses sarcasm to communicate, well, you're not allowed to tell me how sarcasm is hurtful.
Mm.
And that's very frustrating because I think a lot of my clients will come back, like when I try to challenge those unspoken agreements or their role, the client's role in participating, they always have like a fear-based response to what what the spouse will do during the confrontation.
Which is the reason they maintain the agreement.
Exactly. I'm like blending a lot of clients here so as to not reveal any personal information. But,
we're pretty safe because it's everyone.
Yeah. This is like a universal phenomenon. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, come on. I do it too.
Yeah.
Without even, that's the fascinating part of all of it is even with all my reflection of self and how I interact with others, which compared to the general population is probably exponentially more, I still can do these things because it's a human self-preservation. It's built into our psyche.
Yeah.
It's embedded.
It's embedded. And you're right, because ultimately it is self-preservation. It's safety to not rock the boat.
And it takes so much energy to figure out what is my physical response right now? What is my emotional response? What is my psychological assumption as to what's happening? What is my past experience with this? There's like 10 things of checklist you have to go down to realize, or at least attempt to get to the reality of what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, it always comes back to that street metaphor. Do they talk about the street metaphor in NA?
Like keep your side of the street clean?
Yeah.
That kind of thing? Yeah.
Well, I don't know how it manifests in NA, but, at least like in Codependence Anonymous, it's, you have to worry about what's going on your side of the street. You cannot cross the street and get in someone else's business and try to control them.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times my clients with these unspoken agreements will attempt to control the emotional reactions of their partner by doing like a certain like prescribed order of behaviors to keep the partner from getting dysregulated. Like I'm going to walk in the house quietly and I'm going to put my shoes in the correct spot. And then I'm going to get started on emptying out the dishwasher so as to not be yelled at about the dishwasher being not done.
And the partner is going to frame that as meeting my needs.
Yes, you're meeting my needs. You have listened to me that, having a dirty house is stressful and you're taking responsibility for your dirtiness. So yeah, that's exactly right. And so it's a very hard thing because in the EMT, like in the ego state world, we talk about protector parts, and the protector part is that need for self-preservation. So the protector part is the one that will do the impulsive behavior of sweeping an argument under the rug or being non-confrontational. And that's the part that we have to get the buy-in in order to do the work, the psychotherapy work for change to take place. Like that's the part that has to believe that I will still be safe if I don't engage in these self-preservative behaviors.
And my part when dating someone anxiously attached, I've noticed a pattern where I can almost have a fawning response where I'm overly flexible and accommodating in hopes that I will create a secure attachment. and time again, I realize what it does is it creates this emotional dependency from the anxiously attached person. And after a number of months in that dynamic, the more balanced part of me comes into the dynamic and says, hey, wait on here. There needs to be some limits and some boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And to not take full responsibility for regulating your partner's emotional state. And then I will do that, and that devaluation process happens.
You see, because you bought into the unspoken agreement from the jump, right? That Evan is going to regulate my emotions, and Evan will take responsibility for how I feel and my perceptions. And then, like you said, it takes some time, but then you self-reflect and you're like, well, fuck, you check in with yourself. I really do have limits about this. And then you
There's something
rewrite
not
the
right here.
agreement. Yeah. And then you've rewritten the agreement, rewritten the social contract, basically. And then that's when I can see that. I can see that happening.
And so on my side of the street, it's important for me to remember that tendency. Mm-hmm. And regardless of what my fears are going to be earlier on in meeting someone, I need to be forthcoming with that authentic version of me that does have boundaries and limits. And if they want to flounder off and convince themselves that I'm some closed off asshole, probably better then than later.
Yeah. So what do you do then to, from the jump, not fall into that pattern of maybe being a little more avoidant and then fawning?
Well, the fawning response is self-preservation, protecting me from potential abandonment. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not thinking about this.
No. It's all primal.
It doesn't.
No, this is coming from your amygdala.
It doesn't feel. And the interesting part is, it doesn't feel like a high risk emotional experience. It's not like I'm stirring. Mm-mm. Or feel extremely fearful or anything like that. It all feels quite surface, which I think in part is probably done from some work that I've had in my life, because there was a point where it would all feel like this emotional, visceral reaction, and I'd be reacting to it. But the programming is still there, even though that emotional side isn't as stark. So yeah, I think being aware of what that tendency is, right? So fawning is this attempt to protect me from perceived abandonment or possibility of abandonment, mm-hmm. and realizing if I fawn, I ensure abandonment, because I'm going to abandon self, mm-hmm. immediately. And then once I come to the table fully as authentic self later on, they probably will abandon me. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot more esteemable to be authentic, clear, and have limits and boundaries initially. Mm-hmm. So I'm not abandoning self. And if they are to not adhere or have a fear response of their own and dip out, it would be a lot easier for me to leave that situation, being able to acknowledge this is from valuing myself. Mm-hmm. And they had their own demons that they weren't able to work through in that moment.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think you and I are both on a similar journey of trying to become more securely attached. But, as you were talking, I was thinking about how two things can be true, right? Like, we might struggle with anxious attachment, for example, but it's also possible our partner is doing things to actually be, like maybe mean-spirited or evoke anxiousness, right?
Yeah, I think we're talking about in dynamics where I'm not doing things malicious or making commitment to be somewhere and then just not showing up, right? Those kind of examples. I mean, I think arguably it would be my responsibility if I were to date someone anxiously attached. So if I say I should be doing that anyway. But if I say I'm going to be somewhere, I need to be there. Or if I say I'm going to do something, I need to do it.
Right.
But that rings true even if you're not dating someone with anxious attachment. But I think if you are, it needs to be even put more on the priority list.
Yeah. I mean, because I had this conversation with a client recently, and I quoted Henry Kissinger, where Henry Kissinger, speaking of Richard Nixon, said, just because you think you're being followed doesn't mean you're not being followed. Right. So just because you're paranoid, you're being followed doesn't mean you're not really being followed. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes as therapists off the bat, we want to correct for that anxious attachment or that avoidant attachment, right? And help lead the client to secure attachment. And that is a noble pursuit. However, I think we have to look at the context also in which these anxious or avoidant behaviors are taking place. And like, I'm thinking about this one client, and of course I'm going to change the details, but the client is going through like a really difficult time right now. Like, let's just say she's got a really difficult time at work. And, it's like a lot of projects coming up and deadlines, and the company's in the process of being sold. And she's got to, be available for her clients and keep them calm while the company's being sold. And then as well as document. And, there's a lot of extra work that's going on as this company's being sold, and of course during tax time. And so she asks her husband, and she's like, okay, while, for the next 5 months, I'm going to need you to make sure the dogs get walked every day at, 5:00 when you're home from work, because I'm going to be having to work late. And instead of being like, yeah, of course, our dogs have needs, I will step up and get those needs met with the dog. Or if I can't do it, I'll hire a dog walker. Instead of like taking that load off of her plate, he can get like defensive or sarcastic and be like, oh, everything falls on me. It's always my job to pick up the slack when you're not available. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, like we were sussing this out, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can hear. And you and I have been working on anxiety as it shows up in your relationship when your spouse doesn't participate in keeping the house clean, or doesn't participate in the mental and emotional labor that you are doing. But at the same time, though, I think it is true to say he's not really following through here. I mean, he's not, like, you're not paranoid. Like, this behavior really is taking place.
And that's growth for the client to vocalize and make all those connections. Like, I feel overrun at work, and I need help at this time with the dogs. That is pretty clear. And I would love for my partner to communicate that way. Because the alternative is, oh, well, it's, I'll take care of it. And they won't even be aware that they're developing resentment, and then lash out in other areas because I'm not coming home and helping out with the dogs. While I'm supposed to know that this girl needs this extra help. I need to be more aware of her life. And I need to do it. And since I'm not, I don't care.
Yeah. That's something, like, we have to go back constantly to that street metaphor. Like, you cannot be a mind reader. You cannot change people, places, or things. All you can do is speak to what your needs are. And then if your spouse gives you a sarcastic or, dismissive response, then that need goes back to your side of the street. And then you have to find another way to meet that need.
And call them out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that leads to like a whole like dialogue about, oh, then he'll say this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, you got to be prepared for that. But, that just speaks more to what's going on his side of the street. And ultimately,
that's an important element I try to remind clients of when we are beginning that journey of sharing what our boundary is or what our limits are. I'm sharing this for me. When we get wrapped up in what the other person is going to do or how it may not be effective, we're going to use that as a rationalization as to withdraw back into the behavioral patterns that we're accustomed to. Because that's why we were doing them in the first place. We were overly invested in how we project their reactions will be to what our actual boundary is in the first place.
And then I'll not have a boundary because I don't want to deal with the fallout.
So I'm setting a boundary
that's
or
a good
limit
point.
to vocalize.
I do need to take it one step further.
Myself and to value myself and to do something that is esteemable for me. Their reaction is their reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So the boundaries and the limit setting, it's a extra benefit if the other person begins to adjust and adhere. But they can't take away, regardless of their reaction, the self-esteem building and the valuing self and the authentic self. Regardless of someone's reaction, they can't take away that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's framed as, this is something that I value and I'd have decided that I need for myself, to not make myself small or to minimize or to avoid.
It is very, like, from my own personal experience, it's very empowering to like consciously identify a need and then verbalize that need, and then have a backup plan for how I can meet that need if my partner is unavailable or unwilling or cannot meet that need. Like, for example, Mother's Day. I think like a few years ago, Mother's Day just wasn't celebrated, and it really hurt my feelings. And so, like, rather than like get angry and upset about that and like have a tantrum and, a screaming fit, I decided, okay, Mother's Day wasn't celebrated this Sunday, but I think I've done a really bang up job with being a mom. So I'm going to take myself out and go do something for me. And then, like, the next year, I even remember holding on to this. And the next year, like 2 weeks before Mother's Day, I was like, hey, Mother's Day's coming up on Sunday. Do you have any plans? And he's like, yes or no. And then that's what information I use. Okay, well, I'm going to go do something for me, or I'm going to set up a lunch for me and the kids. And of course, you can come too, Mike. And, and we're going to go have a good time, and I'm going to take responsibility for this. And yeah, I mean, I can already hear clients being like, but should I really have to do that? I shouldn't have to do that. That's like, we have to deal with reality. If we can't deal in the world of shoulds, like the reality is, my spouse is not a bad person. He gets it right, 364 days a year. Sometimes things fall through the cracks. I've got to be able to take responsibility for what I want and need.
And to forget something, it doesn't have to be this personal attack.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I had a choice in that moment. Do I take this personally, or do I look and see what else is going on in the context of our lives?
Because if we could go just into the emotional realm, it's like, I'm a bad mother, my spouse doesn't love me. It goes real dark.
Yeah. Definitely can go dark, especially for an American mother on Mother's Day. Yeah, definitely. And I just chose not to do that. I was like, I don't know, I guess all of my stress responses were manageable that week. But I was like, no, I'm going to just go. We're going to go have a good time, and I'm going to have a good time this year, and the next year I'll plan something.
What happened the next Mother's Day?
Oh, because I mentioned it 2 weeks ahead of time. It gave him plenty of time to think about it. And he's like, yeah, it's never anything extravagant, but we'll go out to lunch, and and he got me flowers and a card, and had all the kids sign it. Just a kind of like just a very
so he's not a dick.
He's not a dick at all. No.
But in that moment, if we zoom in and look through a peephole, he's a dick.
Exactly.
And that was some passage I think I forwarded you from a book I was reading, where it was I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, if we look at one moment in any kind of human interaction and use that to sum all of our experience of them, we're going to be very short-sighted and disappointed and inaccurate. We need to have an ongoing relationship and redefining of what that relationship is. It is a consistent, engaged process.
Yeah.
And to give people the benefit of the doubt, it's often said, but are we doing it? Because I want the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Anytime I screw up, I am just begging for someone to give it to me, but am I doing it?
I think giving yourself grace and giving your partner grace goes a long way. And if you don't believe that your partner has good intentions towards you, this is not the relationship to be in.
Or if you don't believe anyone has good intentions.
Yeah, then you shouldn't be in relationships.
I think that's more common. It's not just the partner, it's their schema of how others are in relation to them.
That's a very sad place to be.
Yeah. But again, like we were talking about last episode, if I can figure out why it's someone else's fault, then I can remain a victim. I don't take a personal responsibility track towards making my own autonomous change.
Right. Yeah, then I would want to know, like if I saw that pattern in a client, I would want to know, what would the client lose if the client lost this victim status? I wouldn't word it as such, but
right.
Contextually, like what is at stake for them? So like what would be at stake if they were no longer the victim?
I think the fear is that they will feel the shame. So it's not accurate, but I think what often happens is if I can no longer live in this worldview that I'm the victim, therefore it is all my fault, becomes an overcorrection. And I think that's ultimately probably their fear anyway. Maybe all this is my fault. I need to work really hard to disprove that fear. But in actuality, it's that post-traumatic growth where I can take my own individual value of self and heal and repair and develop different programming.
Mm-hmm.
That's the actual result. But I think the fear response is the shame evoking.
I mean, I think, that is a necessary ingredient for post-traumatic growth, is taking responsibility. However, I think you have to meet with a really well-trained, thoughtful therapist to suss out what genuinely is your responsibility versus not your responsibility. And I think that can be a very healing process if someone's ready for that deconstruction.
Yeah, if you are meeting with an unskilled therapist, it could easily go into the self-blame category.
Yeah. Oh, God, so, yeah, I could see that happening.
Something sexually traumatic can happen to me, and I still need to take responsibility, not in terms of the event, but the healing.
Mm-hmm.
This happened. This was awful, but I have to make an active attempt to take responsibility for what the cards are on the table, right? Mm-hmm. This is a new card that someone else put down, and now I have to work with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not going anywhere, and no one's going to do it for me.
No. I think, yeah. I mean, that actually, maybe it's paradoxical, but I think when someone has that come to Jesus with themselves, then they really make great inroads into developing more stability. And stability being like the key to then leading to the deeper level work of processing what happened to you.
Yeah, so it's not to self-blame, but it's to take accountability for what the healing journey truly is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's hard to heal when we conceptualize our lives as victims, or we're very invested in assigning blame to everyone else around us. I think it's quite impossible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as like an EMDR therapist, I see that as like when you talk about the card on the table, what is the negative core belief this is kind of a granular example, but like, what is the negative core belief that maybe developed or got reaffirmed during, that sexual trauma? And that's the negative core belief that we have to take responsibility for to rewrite it so that it becomes adaptive rather than maladaptive.
I would think a common core belief that's enacted from sexual trauma would be worthlessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or this is how I express my worth, through sex.
Yeah. Worthlessness or safety. Or it could be that responsibility follows in the EMDR world. The phrase "I am responsible" can be in two categories: the shame, worthlessness category, or the action, like I didn't do the right action, and that led me to this sexual trauma.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that is often there's another reaction where someone perceiving themselves as a victim is shame evoking. They don't want to be identified as a victim.
What do you mean?
Someone who has experienced trauma, if you use language like victim of abuse, they have a anger response to that, as though you're perceiving them as less because of what they've experienced.
Yes, it could evoke defensiveness. Yeah, I could see that.
So you have some that have that self-preservation of perceiving themselves as a victim, and then others have an anger response if they are perceived as a victim. Because if they're self-preserving, because if they're perceived as a victim, that means they're weak, or they're susceptible to being taken advantage of.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you just have to gauge that. Hopefully through the rapport you build with your clients, you can navigate that terminology and navigate any potential defenses.
Well, I've been lucky enough to where the clients that have an aversive reaction to saying a victim of sexual trauma or emotional abuse, whatever it is, they're usually pretty forward initially when the topic arises.
Oh,
so I haven't gotten caught in that. Not yet.
I'm sorry. Suddenly these headphones feel like they weigh 20 pounds.
It's all the boring dialogue I'm putting into your ears.
I can see if I can take him off. Hold on. Okay, can you speak?
Yeah, you may have to switch the audio to microphone or the computer audio. Hello? Hello?
No. Now?
Hello?
Okay, we'll put him back on. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you can do it while we're on.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I can. That's all right.
They feel heavy on your head.
Yeah, they do. It's so weird. I've never noticed this before.
Yeah, that's funny.
That is cheap Amazon. I gotta probably get something better. Well, we're at the hour mark. I think we've done good work.
Yeah, unspoken agreements and how that interacts with attachment and trauma response. And in the short term, avoidance feels like the easier, softer way, yet you're going to have a lot of unintended, prolonged consequence and get yourself into a real mess in the relationship dynamic.
Oh my God, you can have years and years and years of relationship dissatisfaction Yeah, this one, I don't know if anybody follows the holistic psychologist on Facebook and Instagram, but she's really good. And one of the posts she put in sometime in 2024 was, you have to start your journey by telling the truth.
Mm.
And if you can start by telling the truth,
God, that
regardless of
sounds
how it
so easy.
lands, yeah,
It's true
you will
though.
change you will completely change the quality of your relationships. And that has definitely been true for my journey with my own anxious attachment, is just to be truthful with myself and with others.
Well, that first part is infinitely important.
Yeah.
And that's the misnomer is we may be thinking we're being true to self, yet we have so much of the cobweb and distortion of self and reality that we may not be being authentic. We may not know how to. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
therapy is very important. So we can be more confident when we go into dynamics where we're being authentic. We know who we are. We know what our tendencies are, what our attachment is, what our common emotional trauma is, so that we
Mm-hmm.
can vet through all that and then move forward with truth and know that it probably is at least near it.
Yeah. That just reminds me of a dream I had a few months ago about that very same thing, about being truthful with somebody. And in the dream, I was just very truthful, not like cruel or, saying nasty things, like some dysregulated accusatory way, but just, just kind of spoke my mind. And then when I woke up from the dream, I just felt so much at peace. I was at peace with myself, right? Like I acknowledged all of my beefs with this person, and
Mm.
no longer gave a fuck about it anymore. I was like, oh, well, that's all I needed to do then. I just kind of expressed this to myself, and now it's really doesn't have any weight on me anymore.
Yeah, it's that fear of if I'm truthful, they're gonna leave,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's physically or emotionally, or the relationship's gonna be hindered somehow. It all equals they're gonna leave in some form.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm truthful and I have been to therapy, I know my authentic self, and they do leave, this is not my problem,
Mm-hmm.
which is important to remember.
Yeah.